Hey guys, and welcome to Alpha Legion Inspired Painting Part 2 using contrast paints. Okay, so in the previous episode we finished off this little tester, okay, this Alpha Legion inspired color scheme, and we finished it with one of the contrast paints, which is the one we ended up going with. Whoop, this one here, okay, which is more of a blue than a green. And yeah, I think it came up really cool. We ended up going for a green for the highlights, which is the Kraken green right here. So I won't go too much into detail. If you want to see the process of how I got to that stage, just watch part 1, which is on the channel. Just go to the video section and you'll find it there. It has this little guy in the thumbnail. So you can go and watch that, and that'll take you through the process of the recipe that we came up with. But essentially we're using a dark blue, this turquoise here, and then moving up to the green and so on. And so for this one, we're going to take this this recipe that we've got, and we're going to now apply it to a character. So maybe just going maybe 1 or 2 shades more, a little bit more highlighting, just to make the color scheme pop even more for your characters. So the color scheme we came up with here is more, I guess, for your basic troops to get them done in a fast and effective way, and then this one is going to be a little bit more for yeah, for your character. So what we've got in front of us here is the Chaos Sorcerer, okay, and so as with the other one, this has had a blue base and over a black undercoat, a Chaos Black spray, and then we've used the Gracia Citadel spray as a zenithal top down to give you this kind of light to dark shadowed look. Very easy to do. Yeah, you're just spraying from the top and you'll end up with this. And so the reason I put the blue on first, which we used the base color, okay, and just to give a little bit of a blue tint to the shadows, since we're using a lot of greens and blues anyway, that helps just add a bit of depth to it all, and that should work really well. So yeah, that's I think where we're going to begin. We're going to start with the base layer, and then we'll move on from there. Okay. All right, so doing the first layer. So we're going to begin just a medium-sized brush, okay, maybe a 1 or something like that. Pick your model up. All right, we're ready to go. So we've got this blue and the turquoise, and just like before in the previous video, we're just going to drag these together and create a mid-tone that is slightly pushed more towards the blue. By that I mean the darker blue there, not the turquoise. So we just keep blending that up until we get somewhere in the middle, okay, on your palette, and then we're going to add some water, and we want quite a lot of water with this, okay. And the reason for that is that we're trying to utilize the zenithal as kind of a way to help highlight this model. We don't want to just obliterate what we've already got. We're going to try to use this. And this technique I've used before, as I've said on my Death Guard. If you go watch the hobby vlogs, you'll see a bit of that. And that's just a fast way. It's just giving you some highlighting, some free highlighting before you've begun. And I think that really helps. So something around about there, where basically you want it to look like a shade or an ink wash. That's about the consistency. So something a little bit thinner than milk. Okay, and then we're ready to go. So what I always do is I'll just do a little test on something that doesn't matter, like the base here, and we'll just drag it across, and if it's washing into all the little grooves and the cracks just like that, then we know we're ready to go. So we're just going to paint all the armored areas, okay, so get it into a nice position in front of you so you direct on, make sure you're comfortable, and then we just start washing that in, making sure it hits all the deep areas, okay, be a little bit more turquoise in there. We do want to see a little bit of that turquoise. There we go. And just hitting everywhere you can. Now it doesn't matter if this hits anything else, that's actually okay. It's not going to matter, because we're going to go paint different colors over the top of those areas anyway, so it's not a huge deal if you end up you know, getting it all over the place. If you were batch painting like your basic troops, you'd be using a bigger brush and you could just do this really fast. I use like a really giant brush. In the old days we used to call it a tank brush. These days I don't know what you call it, a base brush or something like that, but a really fat one that's like, you know, it'd be like a 4 or something like that maybe. And you just do that really quickly. So basically we just keep doing this, and when this dries you're going to see a darker shadow line all in the grooves, just like as if it was an ink wash or a shade, and that works really well, and you'll end up with something like a really good base, a sort of a blue-green base to work on the first layer after that. And we're only going to be doing maybe 2-3 layers, not much more than what we've done before, so it will be relatively fast, but we will pay more attention to the highlighting stage to help give this character a little bit more attention and visual interest than the basic troops. So that's where we're going to be at. Okay, so now we've got our first pass done, and this is working the same way as the main recipe. So just this thin shade wash of that 50-50 mix. That's what we end up with. So you can see there on the foot, it just goes a little darker in the recesses, and you'll probably be able to see it on the backpack here. You just get a bit of darkness in those edges, and that's what we want. So from here, now we do the first layer, and the first layer is going to be the same as the rest of the army, so we're going to be using that turquoise. So let's get our brush. We can use the same one, that larger brush, like a 1 or something like that. Add a bit of water to your paint. We're going to create not quite as watered down as the first pass, but still quite thin. We just run that off, and the reason for this is we still want to, again, we're trying to maintain the layers underneath and keep some I guess hue variation across the surface. So you should see some blue coming through, you should see some green coming in, and it'll also maintain this zenithal highlight, which will help give us natural gradation over the surface as we build up. So we don't have to worry about being too thick. Also, because we're using contrast, and as I've explained before, contrast paints tend to saturate, so it's going to enrich and deepen all of these colors anyway, so don't be worried about it if it looks a bit washed out. That's perfectly fine. The contrast is going to fix all that and give it a very vibrant color, as you saw on the test, and that's where we'll end up with. If you go to town with these paints and build it up very rich color, then there's also almost no need to use contrast. So we're trying to maximize the effect of the contrast and let that do the work for us. So let's get into it. So we get this turquoise here on the brush, and let's pick a nice little spot, maybe this toe. Okay, is that in focus? Kinda is-ish. Okay, so just paint that on, leaving around those edges, and it'll dry a little thinner, a little more transparent than what you're seeing here, and we'll end up with a nice blue to greenish turquoise finish. So let's see if we can see there. Okay. And you just keep going over it until you're happy. So just let it rest for a bit, go to a different area, and then come back. And you can do a couple of passes at this if you really want to. You don't need to too much, but just in certain spots, if it's looking a little bit patchy, you just clean it up. But we don't want to go overboard, because, as I said, we're trying to keep each of these layers quite thin and quite transparent, so that the work we've done previously shows through. Otherwise, there's almost no point in doing this. So you are working with thin colors, and don't be afraid of that. You might seem like, ooh, it's going to go everywhere. The trick is you're just using the edge of the brush and just lightly feathering. You're not putting too much pressure. Very light little touches, just light little touches, and you'll watch that paint draw off the end, and you don't have to worry. You're not like going full hard, slapping it on as fast as possible. Just nice little draws like that, and it just naturally comes off the end of the brush. And so this is also helping you build control. So if you've ever struggled with that, or you're finding it difficult, this is really going to help you. So I'm going to go through and do all this now, and when we come back, we'll take a look at that layer, and I promise you it's going to look really beautiful, and that nice greeny blue style is going to come through. Really awesome. Alright, so let's take a look. So that turquoise is now going on. We can see it best on the foot there. It's got that lovely shadow and the lighter color in the flat areas of the armor panel. Same on the shoulder pad there and the backpack. And this is coming out a little more blue than what this actually is, so my camera doesn't quite pick up the right turquoise color. It's coming out quite blue, but it's actually more of a greenish blue color. And if you do it at home, if you're doing a turquoise color, you'll see it's not quite as blue as this. Unfortunately, you can't get a true color from this camera, but yeah, it's definitely less blue than what you're seeing here. It's got a lot more green in it, which is looking really nice. Very, very Alpha Legion. So if you are just a beginner, and I guess if the next stages of layering and highlighting scare you, you can always do the Kraken, the green here, as a focused soft dry brush with a wedge-shaped brush, synthetic brush. Something like this would be really good, because you can direct. See if that's in focus. Yep, something like that. Here, this shows it a bit better with the wedge shape on it. Okay, I talk more about that in the previous video for part 1, so I suggest you go watch that if you want to do just the highlighting and the contrast color of the top in a more simple method. Otherwise, continue on with this, and we'll move into the first layer of the highlighting. So we're not going to do a line highlight yet, like we did in the previous video. We're going to do an extra level of shading across the armor just to add a bit more variety and depth to this armor here. So we'll be adding a little bit of this Kraken green into the turquoise, just to bump it slightly lighter than the turquoise. So something not quite 50-50, but we're going for something that's starting to look a lot more green. Okay, so we're just moving that in like that, dragging it across, and we're starting to get this slightly greenish color there. Okay, and it's about a tone lighter, somewhere about that. And again, just quite a thin coat, 2 or 3 drops of water in, not too thick. This will be very forgiving. It'll dry a bit transparent, and it won't totally change the overall look, but it's going to just give you a little bit lighter tone when we put the line highlight on. So let's see, where's a good spot? So we'll start with the foot again. So we just come in here, and you're just going to be just lightly feathering this in across all the raised parts where the natural light will be hitting. And if you don't know where that is, your miniature hobby light that you're using to paint with is going to be usually above you. And all of the brightest parts, the real light in your room, like off that light, is going to be hitting the top surfaces and showing you exactly where the highlight should be. So just follow that as you're lifting the model up, okay? And that light is shining down. It's showing you where the shadows are and where the light is. We're just feathering that in just to make this guy's armor pop. So it's just going to go a little bit more greenish. So you don't have to be the same all the way around. You can put a little bit less here and there. I'm just putting it in some of the major spots where light would hit it, like that foot there, a little bit across the top of the just light little feathering motions. It's chaosy, so it doesn't have to be like super smooth. We're just adding a little bit into there, like across this little area up here, like the top of the chest there. That's a really great place to do it. So you've got this natural curve, so we just put it across the top. Okay. Run it down. Alright, let that dry off and take a look at it. And if it feels like it's a little bit too stark of a contrast, let's say we don't like that so much, then you can come back with the original turquoise and just wash a little bit of that in around where the 2 colors meet, and that will soften it. So I'm going to go through and do that now, and I'll be back in a sec. Alright, so let's take a look. So we can just see, even with this camera, I should be able to pick it up pretty good on the shoulder pad. You can see there's this sort of slightly more green tint to the top and then it goes into more of a blue. So that was just done, as I showed you, just a thin coat of that slightly brightened turquoise to the green that we blended up. You can see on the chest plate there, it's a bit green on the top and it goes into the blue. Same across the shoe and so on, or his power armored boot, I guess. Across the top of this one, it's more blue on the underside, a bit more green on the top. And as I said, if you find that the shifting between those two is a bit too stark, you just use a little bit of watered down turquoise, and that will, you know, and you paint it across the line where the shifting color is, and that will soften that transition. You won't have to do it too much. As I said in the beginning, the contrast paint we put over the top is going to fix pretty much everything and re-establish shadows and do all that. So I've just gone across the tops and done all this sort of slightly more greenish hue just to help us build a bit more definition for this character. And now we're going to move into the first stage of the line highlight. So this is going to run similar to the first video. So we've got our Kraken here. I'll just move it over to maybe over to here so we can see better. Okay, and then like we did last time, we're going to tint it with a little tiny bit of the turquoise, so that we just end up with a slightly darker version of the Kraken before that Kraken color goes over. So see how that's just like a little bit darker than that. Just running it in. It's like maybe just like one drag of this turquoise. You don't need much because it's going to be quite strong. But we just want a slightly off color. And so now we're probably going to change brushes. So I've been using that one for pretty much the whole time. But now we're going to move over to our fine detail brush. So something like a 0 or something like that. Something with a fine point on it. And we're just going to load that brush up. Again, this is pretty watered down. Same technique. Just light little drags. It can be a little thicker if you want it to be. That will probably help. If you find line highlighting a little bit hard, then a slightly thicker paint will help you drag a little easier. It won't run, but you don't want it too thick for this because it's going to give too stark a contrast. We're playing with this I guess glazing method of painting, and so we want to maintain that. So let's get into it. We will begin on this the foot again. So we've got our slightly tinted Kraken, and we're just going to run it going directly on, not off to the side or that. You're going on like this. Now normally if you've got an edge that you can obviously use the side of the brush to run that line highlight. You won't be able to do that in all cases on a Chaos model. There's tons of internal panels that don't allow you to do that, so we are going to have to use the point on those. And when you're doing it, get into a good position. Model in one hand, brush in the other, and you're going to come at it from an angle that's comfortable, and you're just going to very, very lightly drag it, and you'll see the paint come off, and you're just hitting again just the raised areas. A little bit more on the brush there. Are we seeing that? Yep. We're just running that along. Okay, a bit more. There we go. And when you're doing this, you know, if it does stuff up a little bit, that's okay. You can actually just come back with a little bit of your turquoise or the turquoise mix that we did, the slightly greenish one, and you could just add that over the top and just gently wash that over the top, and you would end up with like back to your original color, and that would soften it if it starts to mess up. So we can see there, we're just going to go through and do that over all the raised areas, mostly where we did the green, and then we'll move on. So now we're finished the line highlight stage, that slightly off Kraken color. And you can see here it's now starting to get the definition. We've got those edges all done. You don't have to go as you know, on all the inner areas there, like on those inner panels, like I did. I'm very heavily influenced by like old school heavy metal painting, so I tend to do that. But you could easily, just like with that shade stage we did, you could just do the tops of everything and that would be fine. But you know, I like to go overboard and start doing all the edges everywhere. So yeah, but it comes up really cool. You can see that nice blue-green coming through now. I think the camera's started to pick that up more now. You can sort of see it. It's a lot more turquoise in reality, a lot deeper color than what you're seeing here. So yeah, this is really good. And again, you could stop right here if you were happy with that, but we're going to try using the contrast. So in order to do that, we need to add another highlight layer to brighten it lighter than we would normally go. And the reason for that is the contrast is going to dull everything down. So we want to make sure that the highlights stay, and then we see a little bit of that bright green. So we're going to do now just a straight Kraken green. So we'll grab our fine detail brush, that 0 that we had before, and we've got a bit of Kraken down here, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it. Okay, draw it off the brush. So we have a nice fine point, and we don't have to do everywhere. We're just going to do the very raised areas, all of these raised sections here. If you've got a line, like if we've got, let's say, so yeah, across this foot here is really good because it shows you the whole thing. So if I'm going to highlight this, I'm not going to go all the way around. I'm going to just do this central part of the highlight and leave the rest. So you get some definitely you get some variation between the two highlights, so you can see both of them. And here I would only go across the top of the foot and a little bit to the sides, and then, you know, across here I would only go just on that top bit there, and I would leave the sides the slightly darker highlight. Same for here, just across the top areas there only, and across the top of the that cowl thing that he's got on, and across here just in those in the centers of all of those lines basically. Across here it would just be in these corners probably, and I'd leave the straight there, the darker one, okay, and just do that where the light would be glinting off the edge. You can even see there with my light there, you've got a couple of spot highlights hitting that surface, and if we turn it around you can see the edges of the trim start to get lighter. And that spot moves over to there. So those sort of corner areas are probably going to get the most light. So you just do that across the elbow joint here, this armor panel. We just do it across the top area there and leave the other color underneath. So I'm going to go through and do that now, and we'll come back and take a look at it. All right, so let's have another look. So now I've got that extra little bit of green on there, and that's just helping everything pop and come alive, and hopefully that'll stay. And this glaze is going to be quite thin, so we're going to be using the contrast medium with that Akellen, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but that green contrast, and we're going to put that on, and hopefully that should keep everything, and we'll get some more blue and deeper vibrancy coming from this color. So this is where it's going to be at. So let's get our larger brush this time, one we're using the first time, okay, and I've got it out here on the palette. The medium is there and the green is there, so we just drag this across, a little bit of it into this until we get this very light bluish glaze, touch of water in there as well. We want this quite thin, maybe even a little more of the contrast medium in there to make sure this isn't too heavy. Okay, just to start off with, we can always do a second coat if we want to, but we're just keeping it light, and we'll see how well we go. So now all you do, just load it up on the brush, and let's start off on that wonderful foot there. We'll just glaze that in. It's going to soften everything. It's going to give you nice deep shadows. It's going to push and bring out some of the blue in that color. And so the green will be more located on the edges than necessarily in the centers. And that's good because you're going to get some gradation happening. And that's really nice. And this is a very relaxing step. So once you've established all this glazing thing is like, you know, you can just put some music on or a movie or whatever you like and just glaze away, because all the hard work is done. And once you're finished, if you do want to go back, often contrast paints come out a little bit glossy. So I've talked about this in the when we were coming up with the recipe for this. But I would suggest giving it probably a matte varnish, like a dull coat, something like that. That'll just take the shine off it. And what that'll do is it'll allow you, if you want to go back and rework the surface, I would probably do it anyway. Again, I would do a test to make sure that you like the finish that you're getting, but that could be a good way if you really messed up the highlights and you want to go back. That way you can go back and reuse the Kraken, probably mixed with a little bit of the turquoise, and touch up some of the highlights without it looking too different from the contrast. And then you could probably go back and reglaze, and that would be okay. But you'd have to do a test. My feeling is you probably have to matte it down, but I would test it anyway before you do it. But that could be a good way to go back if you need to touch stuff up. Because one of the complaints of these types of methods is that once you contrast glaze something, you can't really fix it after that because the color's different. But I think you could. You just got to be careful with it and keep everything subtle, and that should work out. But you shouldn't have to. Once you've done this level, it should be nice as is. Should work out really well. So I'm going to go through and finish that, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, and there we have it, the finished work. So the contrast has gone on, and it's now just given it a deeper luster. Yeah, as I said, this camera doesn't quite pick it all up, but it's definitely there. You've got some really nice deep turquoise colors there. There's blue in the shadows. The highlights are good. And as I said, if you wanted to go back and touch things up, you could. This has been a fairly thin coat, so it's not that glossy, but if you wanted to try matte varnishing, I'd do it on your tester first, see whether it shifts the color too much or changes it. But if you wanted to, you just use a little bit of the Kraken and go back and retouch up if it's dulled it down a bit. You could even on your Lord or your hero model, you could add a little tiny bit of white to that Kraken, and that would give you a lighter color, or even a very, very bright yellow into the Kraken might work as well, whichever way you want to go. But I don't think it's that necessary. I think this comes up pretty cool, and this is good for an army standard. We're not trying to win golden demons here or any of that. We're just trying to get some nice finish tabletop models there so we can start playing some games. That's the point. So yeah, I think this comes up good. I hope you've enjoyed this and you get something out of it, and definitely give this a go. And as I said on the tester video, you could use this type of application for any color and any Chaos Legion at all, really. These kind of bright contrasts with this type of method of building up in thin glazes over a zenithal works really well for anything. You know, I could see a good Zine Charmy getting done like this, or a Slanesh one. Even like a really bright toxic sort of Nurgle army would look really cool with this type of method. There's a lot of greens, yellows, purples, like all those colors are there in the contrast. So you could find one that works and do a tester like I've done here, find a recipe, and away you go, and you get this really nice, bright, vibrant, sort of classic chaos looking finish for your armor. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, hope you got something out of it, and yeah, I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Alright guys, I'll leave you with the recipe at the end and an image of the finished model so you can get a close-up look at it. But otherwise, have fun, enjoy your hobby, and I'll catch you on the next one.